Good evening. This is the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Board meeting. It's a special meeting. It is Thursday, September 12th, a few minutes after 6:30. Our agenda tonight is to just review the letter that was sent to the Secretary of Education, the response from the Commissioner, the proposal from Mr. Betancourt, who's, well, it's not really a proposal, but he's here to discuss NASDAQ's services. We'll introduce ourselves in a minute. The VSBA proposal came in today. It's actually in front of you in paper, and it will be posted on the website tomorrow morning. And then we'll discuss the search options. There's an other, and then a possible executive session related to personnel regarding the superintendent search this evening. So if I also want to welcome Dick Franz, who is the new Woodford Board rep. I'm very excited to have Dick back. Mr. Paul Guru to join Leon. Yes.
He's been continuing this
Nice.
policy, even though he's not an official.
Thank you.
But now he is.
Sandra, thank you for coming. We have the local reporters and Mr. Betancourt. So Larry, would you like to introduce yourself? Richard's going to take the minutes from this, or the official minutes from the tape. So,
Okay.
Larry?
Can I say something just before that?
Yes.
At our Shasberry meeting last night, we learned that Mr. Cutler is leaving, and I'd like to express probably all of our appreciation for the work that he has done and for the effort that he's put forth and CAT TV has put forth on our behalf.
So can we
Thank
turn
you,
the
Mr.
camera
Cutler.
around on you, Mike?
Yeah. Let me take that for a second.
So Mike has been with us in many different
Yeah.
capacities over the last couple of years. He's a Mount Anthony graduate. He's a graduate from, what's the college in Florida?
Full Sail.
Excuse me?
Full Sail.
You can say it because I didn't hear him. Anyway, he's got a degree that he's going to actually be working in Colorado, and I'm very excited for him.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll find his way back.
Well, he's a loss.
So, thank you, Mike.
Larry Johnson, Shasberry.
Davis Bruce Hurley, Woodford.
George Sleeman, Bennington School District.
Ken Sherrod, Bennington, and Mount Anthony.
Sean Marie Oler, a representative from Mount Anthony.
Catherine McClure, Superintendent of Schools.
Cindy Brownell, Pownell Elementary.
Donna Leap, Assistant Superintendent.
Leon Johnson, North Bennington, Mount Anthony.
Franny Kinney, Shasberry.
Jim O'Connor, Pownell. Ray Molyneux, North Bennington.
I'd also like to say to Art that he helped the district, the SVSU out, his company did, back in 2008, and back then our SVSU board was 18, and we had a difficult time over the last couple of years making a quorum. The board recommended that we have an alternate and go to 2 members, so the board is, it was a 12-member board, and we have now a non-operating school district within the supervisory union, so we went from 12 then to 11. So it may look a little bit smaller from the last time you joined us. So just for information's sake. So the first item is the request that was sent to the Secretary of Education. I took under advisement the motion that was made by this board to send this letter, and I struggled a little bit with the wording, but I did not put interim in or permanent. I just used the word superintendent, and I put the statute below it, and then we had a response from Secretary Villaseca, which stated that we could proceed, and there were a few caveats in terms of sharing the resumes with Carol King, who is an administrative assistant, for them to then review. And I think there was another caveat about records check and advice from the secretary. So we are good to go in our process. You know, we did the formality and we got the approval. So now we're at the point where we will we will hear from NASDAQ what services are available. Art will answer any questions we have. We can then review the proposal from the VSBA, and we can have a discussion amongst ourselves on how we might want to proceed. So Art, would you like to come up and either sit or stand?
If I sit here, will this work
That
for
would be
everybody, do you
totally
think?
fine.
Okay, fine. I do have some handouts. May I hand them out?
Absolutely.
And I did notice that the number went down, so I brought an even dozen. I think that will do it, May. Excuse me.
I'll take two for my other representatives.
Thank you.
We need
I'm coming back.
just,
Counting.
We
We can share.
yes,
Yeah.
one, it's like,
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak with you. As mentioned, my name is Art Betancourt. I'm the Executive Director of NESDEC, the New England School Development Council. NESDEC is a not-for-profit organization. We're located in Marlborough, Massachusetts. However, we serve school districts all over New England, in all of the New England states. And in fact, do superintendent and have done superintendent searches in all of the New England states at one time or another. We also do a lot of other types of work for school districts. We're very involved in planning. We're involved in professional development work. We do a lot of facilities planning work, management, organizational work, and those kinds of things. As far as we know, there is no other firm or organization like us that does more work throughout New England than we do. And that is because we, number one, do a lot of work, but obviously our work is varied as well. In coming here, I just wanted to mention that, is it Mike? Is that right? Mike is going to, is it Boulder, Colorado? My wife is from Boulder, Colorado. We have roots in Boulder. Beautiful. I'm there probably 3-4 times a year, so it's a great spot, and we certainly hope you do well. I didn't, when I was first contacted by Sean Marie, I thought about how I could best help you. And rather than submitting a formal proposal at the time that I had learned about the possibility to come to speak with you, what I thought would be most helpful would be to sort of give you a range of services that we can offer you. And also perhaps in some informal conversation with you, get a better handle on your needs and how as a district you might want to proceed. I know that Catherine has given you her notice. At least according to the newspapers, there's some flexibility in terms of her exit, and knowing the kind of person she is, I know, committed to a good transition. Essentially, what I can tell you is that there are a number of different ways of doing a search, and a lot depends on how the school board wants to proceed. A lot also depends on your timing and when you would like to have your new superintendent on board. I've read in the newspapers, and I'm not sure I'm completely up to date in terms of what your conversations have been, but there was some talk about a new superintendent coming in perhaps mid-year. Is that still on the table? Okay. And then there was also some discussion, I believe, about the possibility of an interim. And then there was also some possibility, I guess, of looking at July 1 as a possible start. All of those things. And all of those things can be done. I think each one has nuances to it that I think would cause us as a firm to approach the search differently. I can tell you that our strength, we have many strengths, but one of the strengths, which is, I think, unsurpassed by virtually any consulting group that serves, any search consulting group that serves New England, is our outreach, because we're not dedicated to a single state. And because we don't get involved in lobbying, legislation, or any of those things, our concentration is clearly on serving districts, in this case, through the search process. So we're not, it's not a distraction for us to be involved in searches. This is what we do. And I can tell you that with all of our outreach, which is national outreach as well as regional in New England, the applicant pool is very shallow. And the contest for talent is very intense. So I think when you put your plan together for how you're going to proceed, I think one has to understand that recruiting, if in fact you're looking outside of Vermont, recruiting is essential. Broad reach in terms of getting the word out, using an organization that obviously knows Vermont, but also knows beyond Vermont and the New England region and beyond that in terms of attracting people. And we do all of those things. Now I know there's another firm that has submitted a proposal to you. They're a fine firm, and they do fine work in Vermont. I think the big difference between us and Vermont school boards is our reach. And I think that's probably the thing that you might want to consider as you move forward. If you're really looking to reach outside Vermont, we can help you with that. I would also have to say, at the same time, attracting talent to Vermont is one piece. Attracting the right talented person, if you will, to your district is another. Vermont, I think, shares a unique culture, as all of the New England states do. And so you would want to work very hard on the right fit for your district, ensuring that from a cultural standpoint, this person was able to come in and fit with the communities and be able to communicate effectively with the people that he or she will be working with. All of that is important. I can tell you that when we work with a lot of candidates, and we ask them, what is the most attractive thing for you when you're looking at a superintendent's position? Number one, hands down, is can I work with the board? Are these people I can work with? Are these people who know how to work together? Are these people who know how to plan? Are they reasonable in their approach, and can we get the job done? Number two is my quality of life. If I bring my family, is my family going to be able to enjoy not only the region, but what the region has to offer, knowing that I'll have to work hard and will be on call pretty much 24/7, but I want my family to be happy as well. And the third thing is money, in that order. So in terms of how you assess yourselves and your attractiveness as a district, a little introspection in terms of how you do business, I think is important. Being able to describe how you do business and present yourselves in a way that projects that you know how to get your business done effectively and efficiently and fairly to all sides. Understanding that, particularly if a person moves in from another part of the country, that there will be a transition period in terms of getting used to you and getting used to the culture of Vermont in general and your community specifically. The other piece that I think is really important for a district like yours is the complexity of your governmental structure, which is something that candidates are going to look at. Short run, there isn't a lot you can do about the way your governmental structure is set up. There's, if you wanted to become more efficient in ways that require votes and permission and those sorts of things, obviously that takes time. But your governmental structure to this person will mean a lot, because your governmental structure will give this person insight, or give candidates insight into how effectively he or she can perform for you in terms of achieving your, first of all, setting goals and setting consistent goals across several different communities, and then achieving those goals. So all of those things, I think, have a bearing on how you move forward, how you recruit, how long you think it will take, how flexible you are in your timeline. It could take longer than you think. And if it's going to take longer than we all think, for example, then having an administrative structure in place that's flexible and can keep things going and keep things moving ahead, I think, is an important consideration as well. We, in looking at this particular search, I looked at our consulting staff, and my thought was that if NESDEC were to do this search, I probably would not be recommending a Vermont consultant. I would probably be recommending someone from outside Vermont. The consultant that I have in mind is actually someone who does work for us in New Hampshire, Maine. He's now in Rhode Island, just finished up Newport, Rhode Island. And he's really the person that I rely on to a great deal for recruiting. So if we were to be engaged for this search, it would be my thinking that a consultant outside of Vermont who would attract candidates to you is what. That's not to exclude that those candidates in Vermont who might be interested. But I think our efforts, assuming you were in agreement, would be to attract from outside the state to the degree that we could. And not only outside the state and region, but I mean, we also recruit in New York. We recruit nationally because we have a presence where we send people to national gatherings and gatherings in New York, for example, where we'll be out in the next couple of weeks. So I think all of that is sort of part of the package that we would offer you. And if that's the kind of thing that you want, then what I would be happy to do is to put together a specific proposal looking at that kind of an approach, which would not be the in-state approach, but would be a regional and national campaign to find your talent. Why don't I stop there and see if there are questions?
Quite a lot. George?
I don't mean to cut through it, I just wanted to know the various different proposals and the costs associated with them.
Well, as they're in the letter that I gave you, and essentially there are 4 levels of search.
Yeah, could you kind of just review those quickly?
Madam Chairman, would you like to address this?
That's totally fine. Ken, can you hand that to George?
Essentially, there are 4 levels. I've represented to you 4 levels of search. The first is simply outreach. And by outreach, what I mean is we would use our networking, our database, our website, and our outreach as a firm to simply attract candidates for you to look at. It's simply attracting candidates, getting the materials in, reviewing them, and then reviewing the application materials, and then passing those application materials on to you for further review, for interviewing, for further scrutiny, and leaving the process of actually looking at the candidates and bringing them through a review process, leaving that up to you at the local level to do. We did this recently in Brewer, Maine. Now, Brewer is a different kind of district from this district, but it has a similar problem. You can't get to Brewer from anywhere. And they know it. And so they called us and they said, all we want you to do is we want you to develop the applicant pool. If somebody calls you, we want you to be able to tell them about our district, and we want you to keep them interested. But we'll take care in-house of the actual search process itself and the review process. And it worked out very well. As it turned out, they hired an administrator of New Hampshire who was available. And they had, I think, for a small city in Maine that's kind of out of the mainstream, they did well. And it's a very attractive community, too. And we did all of our business over the telephone, and that worked out really well. So that's one way to do it. It's inexpensive. It keeps the school board in the driver's seat in terms of how you process candidates, and you get the advantage of our outreach. The next level is called a guided search, and in a guided search, what we would do is actually assign a search consultant to you who would help you develop the timeline, would help you with interview questions. Again, most of this is done remotely. There'd be very little time on site. And again, the actual process for the screening process and the review process would be handled at the local level with the search consultant at arm's distance to be there when you needed advice or guidance in terms of how to proceed. That's another level of expense because of the search consultant being actually involved in the search, even at a distance. The third level is our comprehensive search services. These are the search services that most districts ask us for. It involves developing your timeline. It involves designing the process with you, the search process. It involves our recruiting, our outreach. It involves our working with either you or a screening committee on site to develop interview questions, to develop the interview process, to help with the final culling down of candidates. It also involves the consultant, usually involves the consultant working with the school board at the point where the school board is into its finalist stage. We do credential verification. Basically, if you want to do out-of-district visits and that sort of thing, we're involved in setting those up. We're also involved in bringing the candidates to your district for visits and helping you really from A to Z in terms of the services. And again, that level of services is more expensive because of the on-site involvement and the direct involvement that we have with you. The last level of search is typically for larger cities, although I can tell you that we had a smaller district in New Hampshire do this last year, and that is what's called the strategic leadership search. Essentially what that involves is a strategic planning process that coincides with the search for a new superintendent, and then the ongoing assistance of that, helping that new superintendent to implement or to refine the strategic planning process. So those are the 4 levels.
Answer your question, George? Is that?
Yeah, I was, the other question on the comprehensive search, your organization comes in with a candidate or several candidates, 2 candidates, 3 candidates. What does it do, for example, if it came in with 2 and whatever the makeup of the group said we don't like either one?
Yeah, it depends. Actually, that's something that we would work through with the board in advance of starting the search. Some boards want us to reduce the candidates to 5 or 6. Other boards prefer that they see all of the candidates. My personal preference is that the application forms from all of the candidates are viewed by perhaps a subcommittee of the board or a screening committee, so that you're aware of what's out there. And then, again, my preference, it's my personal preference, some of my consultants might even disagree with me here, but I prefer working with a subcommittee or board, if you wish, in actually looking at all of those candidates, deciding those candidates that you'd like to interview, and then continuing in a process that eventually culls them down to 3 or 4 that you might want to seriously consider.
Thank you, Sharon.
Are there other questions of Art? Jim?
On this executive search assistant outline, 8M, you have the word warranty. What is that?
Well, if we do a comprehensive search for you,
Oh, I remember this.
let me back up. Hiring a superintendent is one thing, and the superintendent clearly is your educational leader, but it also represents a relationship. Relationships can go for a long while, or they can go not so long, and you really never know until you get into a relationship what you're really going to have to be dealing with. So for our searches, if you do a comprehensive search, we will include a 2-year warranty, which sounds strange, but it means a lot to boards. And what that 2-year warranty means is that as long as you maintain active affiliate status, which means as long as you pay your dues to us, we will warranty a search 2 years from the date of the appointment of your superintendent. So if your superintendent leaves within a 2-year period of time for other than retirement or an upgrade in the system, which applies really to assistant superintendents, we will do a similar search for you over again for no fee, just expenses. Now, the reason we say the expenses are not included in the warranty is because a lot of your expenses are advertising expenses, and we can't control where you want to put your ads and that sort of thing. But there would be no fee charge for that 2-year period. The warranty also includes that the search continues until it's done. If you don't like the first group of candidates that we bring to you or that you develop with us, bless you. We will stay with you, provided we're all working in good faith. Obviously, if people are out to make sure a search doesn't work, then that's another issue. That never happened to us. But as long as everyone's moving ahead in good faith, if you don't find your candidate, then we will continue searching for that candidate until you do. That's the warranty.
I have two quick, simple
Good
questions.
catch there.
One for you. Are we members?
No.
You're not.
Not currently.
So
We
what is
have-
it- what is
we
the
have been in
membership
the
dues?
past.
Well, let me
Okay,
address that.
two
too.
questions at once. What are the membership dues and how many employees do you have? You're offering a lot of services here. You must have 2,000 people.
No, we
it's
don't.
not.
Actually, let me address the second thing first. We have a huge footprint, and we're well-known nationally, and certainly well-known regionally. And I'm very proud to say that with that huge footprint, we're a very small firm. I'm full-time with the firm. I have a full-time administrative assistant. I have some part-time clerical staff in the office, but all of our work is done on a contract basis. So when we have the work, we hire. When we don't have the work, we don't, which is how we can do as much work as we do. Your first question, are you a member, are you an affiliate now? You're not. I wish you were. But if you were to do a comprehensive search with us, we would offer you free affiliate status for a year, which would entitle you to enrollment projections. Also another product that we have that is included with the affiliation is a special education trend report, which some districts do and others don't. And also our publication, you get access to our publication. We're also associated with the World Future Society, and their journal is something that our members get as part of the affiliation. So you get a year for nothing, for free, and then after that we have a gradual affiliation membership, which means that in the first year your affiliation is at 50%. Second year, your affiliation dues are 75%, and the third year, it's 100%. For a district year, so how many kids? 3,000?
3,000.
3,000. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's probably somewhere around $3,500 a year.
I think you're right on, because we were formerly
Yeah.
affiliates, not recently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ken?
In your experience, been doing this a long time, do you think that this is a good time of the year to look for a superintendent and think you can, 3, 4, 5 months find someone? Or are they all jobs they working now, or is it better to seriously look like starting in January?
I would suggest that you start now, no matter what your timeline is, because now is the time when you want to be out there with the vacancy so that people understand that there's an opportunity here. I would not, how do I say this? I would not think about putting someone on mid-year as my first choice. I mean, if it worked out that way, that would be great. But I think, the fact of the matter is this is probably one of the most important things a board can do, aside from, getting the finances for the district and monitoring those finances. It's probably the most important thing you can do. And I think one of the big mistakes that a board can make is rushing it and not getting the person that fits. Not that people didn't try, but that, if you had given it more time, you might have gone in a different direction. So I would suggest that a search starting very soon. Typical search runs about 120 days. If you were to start a search within the next month or so, you'd probably have your finalists February, March. You could make your choice March, April. You could have a transition period and move your new person in. If you get lucky and you can accelerate it, which sometimes happens, then you do that.
And when you say accelerated, that means that somebody would have to give notice somewhere if they were working, or if they weren't working, then that would be a notice.
Yeah, superintendents typically have a 90 to 120 day notification period. Some of them have a 180 day notification period. So, and you don't really want, I don't think you would want a superintendent to in any way leave a district on other than good terms as a result of the separation. So you really have to count on about 100, I would say 90 to 120 days.
Our search with you in 2008 was executed on Thursday, October 23rd, 2008. And I think we did we didn't do the most comprehensive search. We did the one underneath that.
You did. Actually, it was sort of in between. It was a guided search with slightly more services. If we were to do a similar, I could even write the proposal up similarly. The cost might be slightly higher because of fuel costs and that sort of thing, but we'd be in the same price range.
Leon?
Well, that was going to be my question. I saw such a range in the fees, and I was going to use the comprehensive search as an example and say what would constitute a minimum. I mean, what would constitute having to go over the 13,000 range in terms of a service? Not, I mean, what is it that we would need to do that would boost that up to the maximum if it's a range there? Or is that a range that you just show and then you write a proposal saying you can expect something once we decide what to happen out here?
No, the range is actually based on services, and the biggest expense, which is actually something you didn't do the last time, but a lot of districts do, is a community needs assessment, which involves electronic survey, a number of focus groups throughout the communities, and a number of one-on-one interviews with stakeholders that you lead us to, which we compile that data, bring that data back to you, and with you, we develop a candidate profile. You folks did not do that the last time because you knew what you were looking for, and you may this time. Frequently, that's the case, that boards have an understanding of what they need and they're able to articulate that. But the $20,000 figure would involve 6, 8, 10 focus groups, for example. Focus groups cost about $365 a piece. So if you do 10 focus groups, you add almost $4,000 to the day.
I think certainly it's a worthy exercise, especially in this day and age, to try and hear from our constituents on all sorts of things, what they expect in education, what they expect in the leadership in the district. I think that often we're so busy trying to do the business that we do that we don't have that extra time to do that outreach for the community. Jim?
Well, sitting next to Leon kicked me for this question, but
He's very far away from you tonight.
you may be able to reach. He's got a long feet there.
I'm glad I'm sitting over here.
Okay, no, you'll like this question.
Okay.
That sounds cheap. In the world of headhunters,
Oh, yeah.
in industry, what's the typical headhunter
Oh.
percentage these days? About?
The percentage?
Yeah.
Typical fee is $40,000 to $50,000 for a small company CEO. We're nonprofit.
No, but I just like the typical in the real world is 40. I know it's a big number.
Oh, yeah.
This seems awful. I wasn't expecting a number this low.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason for that. I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, so part of what we are able to do, because we don't have a lot of frills, we drive the money to the resources. The other thing is, if you're a nonprofit, you're not looking to make money. People don't. There are other boards that I deal with who think that $20,000 is an extraordinary figure. And when I tell them you wouldn't believe that there's no profit in that, it's hard to believe. But the fact of the matter is, the margin's very slim, and that's how we do it.
Is the answer to my question knowable, a typical headhunter fee? Is that out there somewhere? Sure.
Well, it depends on the size of the organization that you're doing them for.
A $50 million company with a
Oof.
$200,000.
My goodness, you're probably in the six figures.
For the fee?
Yeah.
Well, okay. And
I
we're
mean,
a
I think
$43 million company?
But that's the private.
44, yeah.
So we're a $44 million company.
Yeah.
So we,
But that private sector is different. I mean, this is the public sector. Clearly, we do things differently.
is he cussing under his breath?
So in case you leave.
He's the cheapest guy I ever met.
You got it on tape too.
There you go, Lou.
You got it on tape too. He's proud of it. He's proud of being cheap.
Dick, do you want to sit up here?
No, I'm fine here. I
Okay.
just wanted to ask you, is there a report that you produce that demonstrates your success rate? How many folks, how many searches you have done, how fast the turnover might be in some of those folks, that kind of thing? Is there?
We do it year to year. We haven't done it for this year yet. I can tell you that to date, the company has done over 500 successful executive searches throughout New England. We did, I believe, 14 this past year, and the year prior to that, I believe we did 17, might have been 18 searches. We average about 15 searches a year. In terms of success rate, the way we answer that question is that our candidates or the appointees typically work through one contract and are offered a second contract. Typical contract is 3 years. So the vast majority of our appointees work the first contract or offered the second contract. But the reality is that superintendents in any one position, the average depends on the state, but 3 to 5 years.
In Vermont, I think it's less than 3, like 2.8 or something.
Could be.
So, Ray?
So how many times has someone taken you up on your warranty?
It happens, and I'm not afraid to say so because I think it's one of the strengths that we have. I mean, we understand that it doesn't always work. And last year, the year before last, we had one district, Hopkinton, Massachusetts. We redid their search, and they have a really great prospect that came on just this year. The year before that was Groton Dunstable. The year after that was Groton Dunstable, Massachusetts. They're still looking at this point because they haven't yet found the match. So it does happen.
Art, in your experience, you did talk a little bit about the complexity of the governance structure in Vermont, and it is really unlike any of the other New England states. So when you suggest that you'd have somebody from outside of here, which I think is fine, I don't personally have an issue with that, but somebody would certainly need to know the complexity of the way the structures work here in order to recruit or entice, or however you want to phrase it, somebody that might be interested in Vermont with being both honest and open about the challenges here.
Well, I think that's right, and I think that's why you might want to think about how wide a net you want to cast. I mean, if you're looking at Vermont and you're looking for the typical outreach that Vermont searches usually employ, although we do search, I mean, we've done searches in Vermont. Well, one of our board of directors is the superintendent of Lamoille South, Tracy Wren. So, I mean, we do them, but I think one of the things to consider is how broad a reach you really want. The governance piece is a big piece, and it takes a special person to come in and be able to say, I can manage this, understanding all of the demands. On the other hand, I've also seen Vermont is not the only state like that. I mean, there are other problems in other states as well. I have seen districts who have informally streamlined their governance to the point where they've reduced meetings, for example. Rather than meeting once every 2 weeks or once a month, they might meet once every other month, or however your schedule is. You know, all of those things, I think, are things that can be looked at in terms of making your governance structure appear to be more manageable. But it's a big problem. It is. I won't deny that. And that's one of the big shocks, I think, coming into a state like Vermont is how much time you have to devote just to communicating with your various boards and meeting with them and meeting your responsibilities.
Other questions? I guess my last question might be, how does a superintendent candidate know how if the board is reasonable?
Well, most of the candidates, And I would suggest to you that any candidate who's really on his or her toes is going to go back through the archives and
Watch
look.
the YouTube videos.
Oh,
and-
yeah. And that's a very interesting question, because the game has changed a little bit in that it's not a situation of you just evaluating your potential superintendents. The candidates you have in front of you will be evaluating you. And they'll be looking for all the cues, they'll be talking to people. Superintendents, very close, whether it's state to state, interstate, intrastate, superintendents talk to one another, they meet one another at regional conferences. You're not far away from, if you're a superintendent in one district, anywhere in the country, you're not far away from knowing somebody that knows someone who knows something about that district. And there's a lot of that goes on. So it's best, I think, to understand who you are, and if you've had problems, then it's probably best to understand that this person is probably going to know that. And that's all part of the give and take that a search becomes.
Cindy?
Do you offer someone to come in and help streamline the boards?
Actually, we do a lot of that work, to be honest with you. We do a lot of consolidation work, a lot of deconsolidation work. But you probably will be surprised at what I say, but I honestly think that your local association, Vermont School Board Association, is a better organization to be doing that in Vermont, because they have a stake in it, and they're working with other districts, I know, and just that feature. So although we could do it, and we would certainly do it well, your own state association might be the one to look at in that case. And I know it sounds strange for me to say, well, there's another organization, but I want to be honest with you. I mean, I think they have a handle on it. I know they're doing that kind of work, and they have a stake in it, I think, in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for driving all this way. I certainly appreciate it. I know the board does.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We're going to keep discussing the next proposal, and I will be in touch one way or the other.
Sure, and if ultimately you would like a proposal from me, you can just give me a call or send me an email to that effect. I can put something together and price it out. But essentially, I think you're looking at something very similar to what you had before.
Okay.
If that gives you something to go on.
Thank you.
Any questions, feel free to call.
Great.
Nice to see you all.
And you too. Drive carefully. So the proposal, and I'm sorry it wasn't emailed to you. I had a busy day. It came back to me early this morning, and I've been go. So I asked Catherine asked Mary Lee if she would copy it and send it out. Do you have a copy, Catherine? Avis, do you have a copy? George?
No, it's
I do. Thank you.
here's the next one.
Does everybody who wants one have one?
Do we have a copy for Dick as well?
Yeah, I actually gave him one before you even got here. Good. I was on the ball. Fran, everybody has it, right? Donna and Cindy, you're sharing? Yep, we have one. So, in listening to Art, you'll see that this proposal, Mr. Dale was down here, I believe, a week and a half ago, working with the BSB board. And I believe the reason it might be as detailed as it is because he had, in the email to me, he shared that he had learned more about what we might be interested in when he was down here. So since I was not at that BSD meeting, I'm assuming that the conversation about the superintendent leaving might have been part of your, what you guys might have talked about.
Very little.
Little bit, very little.
One of the topics that was covered, because Steve Dale was working with the board on essential work at the board, there are 6 essential functions, and one was hiring a superintendent. So it fell naturally under that function responsibility.
So, at first, as you may recall from my email to everybody, Mr. Dale last week on Friday said maybe you should just post the meeting without my proposal because he had been very busy with regional meetings and being down here. And I basically told him that was not acceptable, that we needed a proposal from our local state Vermont School Boards Association, and that I would wait till Monday to post the agenda. And so he absolutely complied. He understood that I wanted to make sure that we had both the regional and the local proposal. And as you see in this proposal, there is a bit about the specific proposal for the SVSU. Again, he, like Mr. Betancourt, spoke about Catherine's retirement, and he writes that it's critical that the board decide soon whether it seek to hire someone to begin no later than January 1st, or if the target is for the next school year. He goes on to talk about that regardless of whether we are looking to hire them as an interim, to search for an interim or a permanent superintendent for this current year or the next year, that he has inquired about a search consultant that would be interested, or that he is assigned or is interested in working with us. Joe Silver has done some work with I believe BSD and MAU in the past. Is that right, Ken? I know he's worked with Mount Anthony. I know that he's retired from being a superintendent, I believe 6 years ago. He lives on the other side of the state. And he has agreed to Steve Dale that he would facilitate whichever search process the board was interested in. So as you see in the proposal, he talks about identifying whether or not we're looking for someone that would fill in now and that could possibly continue to the next year, as was maybe mentioned by discussion at the personnel committee, and then again at the full board meeting, I guess a couple weeks ago. Or if we were looking to put somebody in just right now, and he would suggest that you look for somebody right now and for somebody who would come in for July 1st. So it's very similar to what Mr. Betancourt was saying, but he was a little more articulate, knowing a little bit more about what was happening in the SVSU specifically. So your thoughts, Ray, Jim, Fran? Fran, we haven't heard from you tonight. Ken?
The one thing that struck me about Mr. Betancourt is that I think he mentioned, I think it's probably true, that the VSBA sticks to Vermont. And when they look for superintendents or interns, it always seems to be a person that's already in Vermont or retired from Vermont that they're passing around. And, you know, that's what I worry about, something like that. You know, if you need all this new blood, and I know it's difficult because every time we've hired a superintendent, I've always asked, you realize there's going to be a lot of meetings here. Oh yeah, no problems. And within a year, too many meetings. I just can't do it. It's killing me. Too many meetings. And I think we are very fair, the SVSU board, telling the candidates that there are a lot of meetings. That's part of the governance, as the gentleman mentioned. And everybody says okay, but within a year. But I think, you know, with a good management of like we do now, it's, you know, separated 3 here, 2 here. You can ease up, like he said. But you know, even though I'm a member of the VSBA, I think it's a nice idea to really reach out, even if it's to New England and maybe New Jersey, New York. Because, you know, like he said, sometimes the quality of life, we may not be the highest paid district around, but we do offer some good qualities of a nice place to live, great place to bring the families up and stuff like that. And there may be trade-offs for people, so, you know.
I would agree with you.
If the VSBA is only going to be searching in Vermont for Vermont candidates, which it seems like they do a lot, that would scare me a little bit.
Well, I'm going to let Ava speak, but he does address that a little bit in the second paragraph. He said that we understand well the candidate pool within Vermont, the region, and nationally. We understand the complexities of the Vermont system and often understand the challenges faced with particular communities. It says that they have a strong link with school boards associations with other states, which, I mean, I agree that they probably do, but from my experience, that they tend to hire people from within, or they're growing their own, Vermont's growing their own superintendents, which is fine. Avis?
I'm not going to even address right now this one or that one. I'm going to address the concept that I've been thinking very seriously about since Catherine announced. And that is, I don't think any of us will deny that the last few months have been very troubled with a lot of upheaval. There is a great need to stabilize personnel, particularly at the central level, and to deal with a number of issues in our policies, etc. Which says to me that our best bet, as far as I'm concerned, is to get an interim superintendent in who will be focusing on, how can I say, the immediate stabilization. I guess that's the best word I can use there. Rather than on long-term issues, although long-term issues will kind of get in there somewhat. But I would very much, because you take an interim for about 18 months, up to 18 months, that would also, while our interim superintendent is getting things a little better in shape, will give us a lot more time to search for the more permanent candidate. And who knows, we might end up with the interim who might say, please take me, and we might say yes, yes, yes. But the thing is that I feel it would be very unfair to get in within the next few months a permanent candidate who not only would like to push through their visions, which I'm certain they will have, but also needs to back up some and deal with some of the loose strings. That's my thought.
So it sounds like you're suggesting again, aside from the two proposals, that however we do it, we look for somebody who's interested in coming in for the short term, meaning a year and a half or so, and possibly longer if that works out.
And then again, we might also have a lot more candidates to step into that position, because I have no doubt that there are some superintendents who have retired or
Poor Ken is shaking
that
his
sort of
head.
thing. No, okay, Catherine, I know you're not going to say.
Ken,
But who might have retired,
4 in a row.
and but who wouldn't mind taking on a challenge for a short period of time.
George.
Avis and I have been friends for many years.
So you're going to disagree?
I completely disagree.
Okay.
If we're going to go out and find a superintendent, let's take the bull by the horns. Let's get going on a search. Let's get one, and this one at best at NASDAQ is not national or international. It's a regional type of approach. And I'm saying, why are we putting that off? Let's go out there and look. And if we don't find that, then let's come back to what you're saying. But I think that we should look at the bigger picture and go after a permanent.
So I really don't mean to put Catherine on the spot, but this is going to do that, because we are looking at a date that sort of we've decided that we need someone to come in here because Catherine would like to.
But George, by getting in an interim, I don't mean that we should delay our permanent search.
Well, I think that maybe we could incorporate both of those things, but
Yes, yeah. Oh, no, I agree, we should start.
Two at once.
yes.
I'm sorry.
I think you
I was out of
I
order.
did.
I apologize for being out of order.
You're fine, but what I'm hearing is what I think Art was talking about, right? Was doing them, and even this one is doing them both at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
Ray or Jim, or go ahead, over here.
But I think Catherine has said that she would stay on until we have this a change, but I think the intern, I mean, if we hire an intern next month, October 1st, that person has to understand that we're still doing that big time search, and if we find someone that's gonna come in May or June, that person's gonna have to step aside, and this person, I don't like this 18 months. And that's almost like a 2-year contract just for intern.
Well, up to
Full-time.
18. It wouldn't have to be a full 18.
But I think the
that could
idea
be
of
understood,
both,
yeah.
getting it, someone to come in right away, if that's what Catherine wants, and she doesn't mind, wants to leave. But we also have to be working for a full-time person at the same time.
Over here, Cindy?
I think we should just go for the gusto and look for a superintendent.
As long as Catherine is willing to stay on through maybe April or
We'll change it.
I think you decide what kind of search you want, and then I said an effective transition. I think that's the key.
Larry?
Sean Marie, at a prior meeting, you suggested that you may have a couple names for consideration.
I did.
I'd like to suggest that perhaps we go to executive session to discuss.
We can continue this a little more just to see where people are at. Just to clarify, at the last meeting, I mentioned that when Catherine announced that I won't say a lot, but 2 in particular, maybe 3, contacted me, and I said to send a letter of interest. As I was going to tell this board tonight, it really kind of depended on what the board decided on. I didn't want to, if we hired somebody that is going to do the search for an interim, then I thought perhaps those names should be sort of filtered to the person who we might hire. If it's not the board's will to do that, to hear the names, I didn't want to put those names in public because those people may or may not be employed, and I didn't want to compromise their current positions. So it is, yes, Larry, I did mention it. I do have it here. They're not copied, but they're here to look at. I'd like to hear from this side of the table what you're thinking of in terms of search, the length, the timing.
Okay. Before I would indulge me for 6 minutes?
Yeah,
Thank
6
you.
minutes.
6 minutes.
You can time it, you can time it, all right. Yeah, it's no secret, and I publicly said, and I apologize to the superintendent for calling her eruditious when the word, according to this erudite over here, is erudite, which means she's very learned in our last meeting. And I said we need someone less learned, and to quote my friend Leon over here, someone who could kick the back half of people. Along those lines, okay, there's been...
Yeah, he says that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this mysterious provision in Title 16, Chapter 5, Section 241, that at midnight in the middle of 1996, okay, appeared in a bill that had nothing to do with nothing, all right?
It was called the Capitol Bill.
We have it.
I have it for you.
Well,
It says,
don't think of my thought.
I'm going to send it down to him so
Okay.
he can read it.
So, if the word is there that we may hire a superintendent, okay? That is the law, all right? But in a normal legislative process, when you change one law, you go through all the other laws and all the regulations and make sure they're consistent. In this case, it didn't happen, all right? And it's never been tested, all right? All right, and many of us here are of the mind, maybe we should test it. So that's 241. In 242, Title 16, Chapter 5, 242, duties of the superintendent. The superintendent shall be the chief executive officer for the supervisory union board and for each school board. So if we don't have a superintendent, we don't have a CEO, all right? Because it's not, the legal term that they told me Montpelier was each section informs the other section, all right? So if we may hire someone that's not a superintendent, all right? And then there's a whole bunch of stuff about provisional licenses and the regulatory requirements for a superintendent, amongst other things, are a master's degree, competence in the core leadership standards for Vermont. And I'm dying. This is such an informative document, okay? that Jesus Christ couldn't pass this test. Okay, it's a huge thing. This general competencies for school district. I'd be amazed if everybody got 100 on this test.
You're gonna get a lot of emails for that comment.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I beg your forgiveness. He's always catching. All right. Now, there's also another section. 16, Chapter 11, Section 261. And I was directed to this section by somebody who knows this stuff. Upon application by the Supervisory Union Board, the State Board may waive any requirement of Chapter 5 or 7 of this title with respect to the Supervisory Union Board structure, board composition, or board meetings, or the staffing pattern of the Supervisory Union. If it can be demonstrated that such a waiver will result in efficient and effective operation of the Supervisory Union, will not result in any disproportionate representation, and is otherwise in public interest. With that background, that 241 says we may, 261 and regulations 50, 40-90, etc., have all these rules for a superintendent. And since the original law of 241 did not go through the regular regulatory process, I would like to make a motion.
Uh-oh.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then we can discuss it, and it's either yes. All I'm saying is, if we want to hire somebody that isn't a superintendent, I'm pretty clear we have to do this. And then we'll see. We're going to ask permission. As is believed, a partial waiver of Section 242 will result in more efficient and effective operations of this supervisory union, and is otherwise in the public interest, should I say aye?
Yeah.
I move that this board, the SVSU, instruct our chairperson to formally request the Vermont Secretary of Education exercise his authority under Title 16, Chapter 7, Section 261D, to grant the SVU a partial waiver of Title 16, Chapter 5, Section 242, period. It is hereby requested that the words, quotation mark, highest ranking supervisory union official, close quotation marks, be substituted for the words, quotation mark, superintendent, close quotation, and quotation mark, superintendents, close quotation. So, if anybody wants to,
What are you saying?
what I'm saying is,
He wants a waiver of the requirements to have a superintendent have all the educational background
No,
and we want a business person.
no.
Is that what you say?
What I'm saying, the overall thing is,
Not a
before we
business
talk
person.
about hiring anybody but a licensed
Right.
superintendent, okay, the law by the lawyer people is inconsistent.
It is.
And if we want to do that, okay, if we want to hire not a superintendent, we got to take the word superintendent. There's a whole list of things.
Who
The
said we want to
superintendent.
hire someone other than a superintendent?
Well, there's a lot of people here.
We want an educational leader who has degrees.
Okay.
You're opening yourself up to just any Joe Schmo on the street.
Well,
I would-
so wait a
I would
minute.
refer to-
I
So-
don't like
So
what
wait
you
a minute,
said.
I want to know what, that whole thing that you read, and I don't have it in front of me, so which part is the motion? Because you had some preamble.
Lots of motions. Here's the motion. The motion is that we ask you to ask the Secretary of Education to take the words, for in our special case, to take the word superintendent out of 242. We're going to use 261 to change 242, which then makes 241 may not hire a superintendent possible, and gives us a lot more leeway on picking someone that doesn't necessarily have
Did you
a...
talk to Mr. Oninger?
Well, I don't understand why you're going all the way around Robin Hood's barn for this. Because the last sentence of C of 241 says, if you don't hire a superintendent, may assign duties to under this title, school principal, principals in the supervisory union, or to other qualified persons designated by the board.
the
Seems
qual-
like you already have the authority you're asking for a waiver for.
A qualified person by all the people who are, I was asked not to mention any names as far as what.
Well,
Okay, but
Okay.
I'm just saying, but what, again, what Ray is saying is
Then why don't
a
you
qualified
just ask
person is a
for-
licensed person, a licensed person is a superintendent. Okay, so
So-
we're back to that.
Right, so it is a bit of a circle. So
Because
in-
all the laws haven't
Then
been cleaned up.
ask for a release from the exact requirements of qualified.
So what you're,
That's what you want.
what I think is happening, and this is where, there's a couple different governing bodies here. There's the Title 16, which is the statute, and under the statute, Vince Saluzzi threw that language into the Capitol Bill in 1996 at the 11th hour because of a district up in the Northeast Kingdom. The supervisory union wanted to take over the running of the school, of the supervisory union. In the meantime, since that 1996, the legislature has taken the rules governing the licensing of educators out of the jurisdiction of the State Board of Education. The secretary, the commissioner is now a secretary. The secretary does not answer to the State Board of Education. The secretary now answers to the governor. So you have these three different governing pieces. And in first read, Ray, yes, it says qualified person. So who determines that qualified person? So a lot of people would say the board, the employing board, can determine who qualified is. But others will say that it is the licensing board that determines what is qualified to be a superintendent. But the language says if you don't want a superintendent. So we as a board could say, we don't want a superintendent, we want a chief officer of the supervisory union.
It doesn't say don't want, it says does not hire.
That's not fair.
Going to the next section, which is 242, it lists everything the superintendent has to do. And if we don't have a superintendent, these things can't get done. There's a lot, all the important stuff a superintendent does is in 242.
Right. Because there's a lot of things that gives it the ability to accept federal grants, title money.
And that's something else, is that all the grants has to be signed by a licensed superintendent who risks her license, her reputation, and their career on understand when they sign this. So, and I understand that we have other licensed superintendents. we have other people with superintendent licenses that could sign these things, so that we can get around. There's a way around that, I understand, historically accepted, okay, where somebody with a superintendent's license could risk their license by signing
Why
this
don't we
stuff.
waste that time?
Right.
Why don't we
Okay.
just discuss the hiring?
So I agree in spirit that
I get what you're saying.
not having such, that changing here for a couple of years to someone with more of a, not from business, for more of a business bent, if you will, to manage this thing, and then bring an erudite under that person for a while to actually handle the education part of it, and have a general manager type.
Okay, so the bottom line is you want to make a motion, which I'm not sure I'm the right person because I sit, if it's to the right person, in other words, is the request actually to the secretary or is it to the licensing board? I'm not sure. And if
No, because it's the law, it's the statute. We want a waiver of the statute, and it says in 261 that the secretary can waive anything in chapter 5 or 7. Anything in chapter 5 or 7. If it's efficient and effective for the supervisory union, if it's in the public interest.
Okay.
And that's the cover letter part.
So I think what you're saying, now let's just sum this up, is that you would like this board through a proxy to ask the Secretary of Education to waive the requirement to hire a superintendent.
Yeah, and we can still hire a superintendent. But it gives everybody in this room the latitude. If you find somebody that can walk on water, is that okay?
That's right.
Somebody that can walk on water, okay, we can hire him or her, okay? And have it be a superintendent with a license, all the better. All right, I'm trying to
Okay, so that,
navigate.
Richard is gonna have to decipher this, but it is written here. And so the motion you made is that Jim moves that this board instruct the chair to formally request the Vermont Secretary of Education to exercise his authority under Title 16, Chapter 7, 261, to grant the SVSU a partial waiver of Title 16, Section 5, 242. It is hereby requested that the words highest ranking supervisory union official be substituted for the words superintendent or superintendents. So is there a second to Jim's motion?
I'll second.
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, Richard bumped, that was seconded by Larry, he's got there before Leon. So now there is discussion. So there's a motion and a second on the floor to request a waiver of Title 16, Chapter 5, Section 242. Cindy, is your blood pressure up?
It's up. It's up. Am I turning red?
No.
I think we've heard from this gentleman that came in from Mass. We've used other companies before to do searches, and I'm quite confident that they're going to produce someone for us. I don't know why we're wasting our time. I want to find somebody who's qualified. I don't want to put somebody in there who does not have an educational leadership. And I think that's where I'm coming from. I think we should just go for use a qualified person to look for superintendent for us.
A qualified search firm.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ken?
But I think this thing is just a request. Commissioner can say yes or no without, this is a big waiver for the commissioner to do. I mean, he had that little Mickey Mouse one in Arlington where he shut down the guy who wanted to be a soccer coach and he's on the school board. He shut that down as being so important that, I don't see this surviving myself, the test going up there, coming back.
It is, I think, systemic of what happens in Vermont at those late night hours when they change legislation, is that like even right now, changing the commissioner to a secretary, they were not able to go through this Title 16 and straighten out the differences between who was responsible for what. So I have, in my 19 years, have seen disconnects within the statute and the governing bodies more times than I would like to think. So, I mean, I think the board needs to, beyond maybe agreeing or disagreeing on this motion, is come up with the qualifications that they would like to see for a superintendent. So while this seems to really fall under other, there is a motion and a second on the floor. So I've got Leon and Avis.
My one thought on this is, why would either the secretary or the board of education consider this type of a waiver as a whatever, go for it, without the name of someone who was being considered and what the particular qualifications were of that person? And I'm just, putting that out.
And I'm glad you went before me. Because I think it's very good. We in Vermont, and this is a very good challenge. And we've taken time over the last month or so forth to talk about what this district needs and where we want to go and where we want to fix things. And we've contemplated that our hands are tied because some of the things that we may need to have is somebody that may be outside the system. I mean, the board has to make that decision. But that's what we're saying, and that's what's tying our hands from really fixing the educational system here with, in the district in terms of managing things the way we see that they need to happen in order to be more productive. So I
So
have
do you
no
sup-
problems with going to the state because he has to rule on it anyway. He needs to rule on it. This is Vermont, and I think it's a very good challenge. But the other part of that we talked about, the criteria and the goals and the direction that we supposed to be going in this board is what we try to look for. And we're saying we want somebody, and I don't want to keep saying it, that has to step in to take and acknowledge all of these things that we said we want to fix. And I'll be damned if we want them to fix it.
What was that?
We want them to fix it.
You want who to fix it?
The person that we're wanting to come in here to do it. And if we are tired, if we go to, and the reason we say, if we go to the educational system, they say we gotta have a superintendent, say, well, the superintendent can't do these certain types of things, or you don't have one to meet these type of criteria, then we need to go outside and get it. That's all we're saying. But I think we can get what we want inside, is because part of the board requirement is the board needs to say where we want to go and the direction that we want to go in. And we've already started that by saying, we listened to all of the chief executive people, they got a list of things, all of them down saying, hey guys, these are some things that we need to be concerned about. The next person coming in need to be aware of that and be put in the hot seat for it, or otherwise they don't get in the door.
All right. We
I
have
don't know
not
what
heard
you're
from
supporting.
Fran tonight.
Oh, I'm just enjoying the conversation here. So, well, the only thing I'm gonna say is I wanna change the system. I'm not overjoyed to get somebody with an educational background, just having that, and all due respect to Catherine and anybody else that has served here. We've always done it the same old, same old. I'm tired of the same old, same old. I want to change it, and if going outside is the way to do it, then let's do it and stop throwing around.
Okay. You've had your say.
Was their idea to have this person, whoever it is, as an intern until we do a regular search and hire some?
My understanding, and this is just coming up now. My understanding from what I'm hearing is that this isn't really tied to any person, at least I don't
Exactly.
think it is.
It's not.
It gives the search committee the authority to do something a little outside the law, that's all.
But you
But
wouldn't
we don't
mind,
have, you're not mandated to go outside the supervisor.
but you
But if you
wouldn't
find,
mind doing a search for full-time regular superintendent in the meantime? Or what?
well, this just says what it says. It just says that we can use our discretion in hiring someone.
Look,
That's
sorry.
Right.
Ken, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to me you're getting the cart before the horse, because it seems to me that this proposal would result from doing the work to get to the point where you want to hire. You got an idea what you want and what you need. I don't know that we do that, frankly. And I think we're jumping the gun here.
So are you suggesting that this motion could, in an ideal situation, that we could proceed with the search, and if we needed to test this section of Title 16, we would then go and do so?
Yeah. That's right.
That would be the
That's
smart
right.
thing to do.
Yeah, that's all we're saying. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, but I personally disagree with your assertion that this isn't for somebody specific. I think this is a proposal that's been worked out outside of this meeting structure by a group of people, and it is for a specific person.
Jim?
I still think that the
consult-
rational way to do this is to approach it from the point of view of what we need to do and what we feel is lacking, and whether, maybe we should do an interim search and see if we find anyone that we think meets this bill, and if we don't, then maybe we could consider this.
Are you saying I'm being too trusting?
Excuse me?
Are you saying I'm being too trusting of Jim here? Jim, would you like to respond?
I didn't say that specifically. I just made
my observation, that there's obvious movement afoot here, and I think there's been some discussion.
There is a movement afoot here, and I'm
Just-
aware of it.
Just trying to pick up on Ray's point, there may be a middle ground here. And the middle ground might be to try the search, see if there's somebody out there, and if not, come back to Jim's proposition to open it up in a different avenue.
All right, so there's a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to add one more thing to the discussion. It may seem irrelevant, but it may have been at the end of the VSBA proposal, but Joe Silver is willing to come should there be questions about this specific proposal on the 26th, which is the second date that we assigned that we would deal with the search, the 12th and the 26th. And I'm just putting that out to make sure that you have all the information that you need as we proceed. Patrick, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm not on the board, and I have no reason to nominate names, so I'm going to ask you. Jim, it sounds to me like what you're saying is you're trying to open the door for Mr. Pembroke to become the new
Absolutely
superintendent.
not. No, I don't like to defend myself. Okay,
You're talking about a business, somebody coming in as a business person. You're talking about somebody being a driving force behind this. You said you got this information from somebody. So you're saying this has nothing to do with Mr. Pembroke?
I'm not saying that. Let me say what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is this. 241 was brought to my attention. And my response says, I'm going to investigate this and get back to you. What I did, I didn't get back to anybody. And anyway, this was done totally by myself. I talked to 8 or 9 or 10 people in the Department of Education, the Agency of Education. I got all kinds of ideas as to what was going on and the concept. And somebody the brightest guy I talked to says, well, it's the law is the law. It is the law. It's the 241C, okay. And this idea went off my head, and I wrote this by myself. Not one person, nobody, okay, read this before I read it tonight. Okay, Sean didn't read it. No one read it. No one read it, or no one knew what it was, other than I have a compromised motion to make tonight. Okay, and it's specifically, I just don't want to mention any names because there's no name. What I'm looking for, and I've done this on camera in 2 previous meetings, was this, and I was involved in a group that talked to all the directors, and we kept picking up this vibe that this no teacher thing. They're just not we're not being anti-teachers. It's a managerial position, all right. And they wanted someone a little stronger.
A manager type.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying. My staff was
Leanne
a
was in the group
manager,
too.
not, I'm just saying something like a plant manager, a CEO, or something like we have in a corporation that may not be tied directly to all the requirements that we currently have in the superintendent's requirement out here, that may be able to get the job done that we want to have done. That's what I was saying, and I hope I didn't misspoke about his
I had a question.
So I'm gonna ask one thing and then you can ask a question. So I think what might be helpful for maybe the board or Jim and Leon or Larry who made the motion is, it sounds like there's an agreement that this is worth testing the statute on, or at least requesting the secretary to weigh in on this. But it sounds like from what I'm hearing from at least some, that it would be better coming after we've taken a look at the candidate pool for the interim. So I'm just wondering, Jim, if you might want to hear the consensus on whether or not people would vote yes or no, or if they think they could wait, or would you prefer to just have this voted up or down? Because I think there is some merit to it. The question is where the timing would be.
242, the word superintendent, negates 241, that we can hire whoever we want, okay? And that's all I'm saying is, if we want to hire whoever we want, we have to do this. And I like to get it voted on, and then it's done, okay? And I'm out of it.
Okay, so is everybody here?
No,
You can speak, Cindy, but I just saw Catherine leave, so I wasn't sure. Avis is here. Okay, Cindy.
okay, I guess my question to Jim is, are you saying that you are willing to accept someone with no educational background, knowing the needs of our children and the system that we have now?
Something else that was explained to me is, if we did hire somebody who wasn't a superintendent, they'd have to present themselves with the ability of becoming a superintendent, which requires and I passed around the requirements for a superintendent. And it's a master's degree, competency in this long list of walk-on-water stuff, some 300-hour coursework or something, and then 3 or more years of teaching and 2 or more years of educational administration. So everything goes against everything else. I mean, and you know, so it's if we did hire somebody, they have to be pretty close, and there was a 2-year limit, from what I understand. There's another law somewhere that you got 2 years to meet these qualifications.
Oh, that's
no,
if you're eligible. If you're eligible to meet it and you don't hold the Vermont, you can get a provisional.
This is even something else. This is something else. This is even, but 5440-90 are some of the regulations, and there's a whole nother book of regulations that spins your head. You know?
I just think it would be a total insult to the intelligence of the people of the districts that send their children to the SU, encompass all the schools, if that we would even consider, this board consider hiring someone, just any Joe Schmo off the street. And that's, I truly believe we need someone who has a master's degree, not someone who's just business-minded, because this is an organization. It needs someone that can handle the whole, encompass the whole thing. And I really don't want to get into just saying, well, let's vote and get somebody that, you know, we want, other than a superintendent.
The other option that was percolating was just to muster the votes and get somebody picked. Okay, and so I thought this was a better way. So I'm going to let the motion speak for
Okay,
itself.
so there's a motion and a second on the floor. Are there any questions, Dick? As the, you know, you're unfortunately, you actually are the alternate that can be here, but you haven't been sworn in, so you can't actually vote, but you can certainly give your opinion.
My opinion is that I think you ought to go ahead and look for an educational leader, because by the time the lawyers get done dissecting what you need done here, it's going to be 2016.
I'm sorry.
So he said to translate, although you can probably hear it on the replay, is that he said he supports an educational leader and that this would tie up the bureaucrats upstate till 2016. Does that sum it up? Okay.
But this wouldn't stop us from proceeding then. I mean, we can still go on.
If this board is willing to proceed with hiring and looking at interims and or permanent replacements, no, it doesn't stop us. But if this board is the majority is wanting to wait for this ruling, it will indeed hold us up. So
that would be my next
we can hire a superintendent.
Well, that's the only point I wanted clarification on. Are we gonna wait for an answer, or are we gonna, later on this evening, go ahead and hire this organization, one or the other, to be looking for a superintendent?
There's no date or time limit in here.
I was
be 5 years.
Can we get a decision?
I was gonna move that we continue and let this thing work on the side. I mean, we wasn't gonna hold up everything. That's what I was gonna do after we took a vote which way or the other. Then we can proceed.
So Jim, would you be willing to take it off the table just so we could discuss where we want to go with the interim, or no? All right. So I'm going to call the question, which is that Jim moves that this board instruct Sean Marie, the chairperson of the SVSU, to formally request the Secretary of Education exercise his authority under Title 16, Chapter 7, Section 261, to grant the SVSU a partial waiver of Title 16, Chapter 5, Section 242. I'm not going to read the rest. If this motion passes, this letter is going to be written by me on the request of the SVSU Board. This is not going to be from Sean Marie Oler, the chair of the SVSU Board.
Exactly, right.
Okay? And I will write it as written with the request. So I'm going to call the question, and we're going to have to make sure that Richard sees the votes. So Mike, could you help me out here? So all in favor of Jim's motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. That would be Larry, George, Ken, Leon, Fran, and Jim. Opposed? Avis, Ray, and Cindy. So the motion passed. Did you vote twice?
No, I just want to explain.
So the motion passes, and I will write this letter. I may have to call, I'm going to include this motion in here, and I will try and put part of Jim's preamble in here more as a quote. Now what I'd like to know from the board is there a timeline that you would like to hear back on this, or can we now discuss how we're proceeding?
So,
Leon.
I'd just like to make a motion that we proceed in the normal manner
Yes.
of filling the superintendent, hiring someone to continue
Right,
with the search
right.
without this.
Please.
Just going out.
That's all.
Ray, we need you.
Give me-
Okay, well, you're going to hold that motion because Ken would like to explain his vote.
First of all, I think it's a good idea for a test case to see if those Vermont laws got its ducks in order. And secondly, I think Leon mentioned something about a plant manager. You know, we have on board, we have a great early ed person, we now have a new sped person, we've got a statistician over here, we got a finance person here, and I think that person who would come in for whatever time would be able to manage with the help of all these people. It would be a group, like in a plant. You got one manager runs the plant, but you get these other people running the various departments and things like that. They report and everything runs smoothly. And that person probably doesn't know how to make a battery over there on Gay Street, but just because he's got the people he trusts.
You're gonna get a lot of emails too.
That's what I'm saying, that, you know, I think we have a lot of good qualified people in the various positions, academic, and stuff. We got great principals up and down that, I mean, and again, I don't know what everybody else is, but I'm looking at this as a fill-in. As Leon said, now we gotta look for a search for the superintendent. Because
What do you mean a fill-in?
so we do a superintendent search, and when we find a good qualified superintendent, that'd be the one we hire. With all regular academic background, but this would give us hopefully you have this answer by the 26th. Tell them it's priority.
That's the point that I wanted to bring up. Are we saying, if that's
Wait,
it, then
Leon's
we're
going to
gonna-
make a motion. Leon's going to make a motion. Leon, are you ready to make that motion, or Jim, is this on germane to this topic? Or is this a different
An
topic?
afterthought on my motion, that I didn't want to say
An
before.
afterthought on your motion?
Postscript on my motion, that I didn't want to say before. This tests the law. It tests that may shell thing on hiring a superintendent. I think that's what we're going to accomplish here. It's either going to be yes or no, and this is
That's right.
cleared up. Because it's an undercurrent going on here that needs to be resolved, okay?
Right, and so my motion is to ask the board to accept, not wait for the answer from the commissioner.
Secretary.
The secretary on our, whether we can hire somebody outside of the superintendents or change that we move on with the process of selecting a move to fill the position of superintendent.
So Mike, I have to ask Mike a question. How well does the mic pick up, the single mic versus the mics that we often have in here, what's being said?
That's substantial, but it's not.
It's what?
I can hear you, Paul.
You can hear, so if Richard was listening to this and trying to get, I mean, I have Jim's motion typed, but if somebody was trying to hear what Leon is saying, to retype or write the motion? Okay, so can you please project that motion, and I'm going to try and write it while Mike tapes it. Go ahead.
I move that the board not wait for the answer from the commissioner on the motion made in terms of correcting our ability to hire outside of the superintendent's position someone else, and that we proceed as planned with hiring someone to do the search and help us hire the next person for this position of the superintendent.
Okay, so Leon is moving that the board not wait for the answer from the secretary, and the board proceed with hiring. Is this, what did you say, an interim or?
No, I didn't say what, we just wanted to.
Someone to do the search.
Continue
Yeah.
with.
Hire someone to do the search.
Hire.
Right.
So you're making a motion to hire somebody,
The group to help us with hiring of the superintendent.
but you're not plugging in a specific name to that.
That's right, and we're not, what I'm saying is, we don't need to wait for the secretary to reply to our previous request.
So do you really need the hire part? Can't it just be that you moved that we not wait for an answer for the secretary to proceed with hiring a superintendent?
You can put it that way, I don't have a problem.
So that you're not tying it to hiring somebody?
Do you,
That's correct, we can do it that way.
do you want a motion to hire someone?
We'll finish this one first. So, the motion that Leon is making is that we not wait for the secretary to give an answer with the previous motion, and we proceed with hiring a superintendent.
I'll second.
Okay, so that's Leon and Avis. Any discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh my goodness, it's unanimous. Okay. Okay, so now we've agreed that we're going to send this to the secretary to test the law. We're going to proceed with hiring the superintendent, with a new superintendent. So what's next?
Adjourn.
I'd like to,
We
Ray,
do-
excuse me. Go ahead. I would
No,
just,
I'm sorry, I was rude, I shouldn't.
I'd like to suggest that we go with NASDAQ.
I'll second that.
Okay,
I'm not gonna pick an option, I wanna discuss it.
Okay,
I'm just trying to eliminate one and get to this one.
I also want to make sure that in executive session I do mention, as I stated earlier, that at least what's come to me by way of the community hearing that there's going to be an opening. Will that conflict with?
That shouldn't have any bearing on this, because we're going to go through the process, and whatever comes up, get under that process.
We'll throw them right in the barrel.
That's right.
Would your information conflict with hiring them?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, let me ask this question. If we go ahead and vote for NESDEC and you have someone that's interested, can't you revert them to NESDEC?
That's
Yeah.
what we're saying, dude.
Yeah, well, is there a reason we can't do that?
Yes, but I mean, if that would,
I've heard many good
you could write it in.
Well, if it's an intern, we can hire our own, but if it's a superintendent, it'll have to be to them, right? Once you sign the contract. It's like when you sell a house, you get a real estate agent, once you get the agent, you have to let them do all the work. You can't say, oh, I got a guy just stopped and he wants to buy a house and waive the commissions and stuff.
So the idea would be, is there a motion on the floor?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's to hire Nestor.
So,
So the
Discussion, discussion.
So under discussion, it would be, I mean, to play it out for a minute, if there were one or two names that we thought, that people on the board felt that they knew the person or that they were a viable person, we could send them through the process and pay a certain amount of money, or we could decide that we don't necessarily need that service at this time. But if we,
Or that you use it while the search is going on. I
Or-
think you've got a variety of issues, a variety that you can offer.
I
We're doing
think that,
two steps.
I think that discussion is gonna have to wait for executive session. You got names you wanna talk about, we can
Yeah.
decide then, and if we have to change it, we'll change it.
okay, so,
Were these people who have names, were they interested in being intern or they full-time?
We're gonna
There's-
do that in executive session, I guess.
one of each. So the motion on the floor is to hire NASDAQ, and we haven't decided at which level, but just that we would, because he actually hasn't given a proposal. I mean,
Yeah, he said you have to work it out once you
It's,
come.
I say we go with a comprehensive search and see what he's got. That doesn't really tie us into it.
so your
Bottom
motion
line.
is to hire NASDAQ at the comprehensive search level for an interim or a permanent?
To give permission to hire.
Wasn't it to hire?
So do we need to go to executive session first or come
Yeah.
back?
I think it was George's motion, and then Cindy
No,
asked.
George made the motion to hire NASDAQ, and he didn't specify.
But Cindy
level.
was saying the
But I have no
comprehensive.
problem, she wants to add that to it.
Okay, so the motion is to hire NASDAQ at the comprehensive level and have them give us a proposal to outline that.
That's right, that might include any of the other options.
Yes, that might include the lesser options or the
Yeah.
more options. Okay,
Let's give him permission to hire.
permission to hire.
Well, you don't get them to hire, you're gonna hire, you can't get them permission to hire, you hire this.
You
The
hire.
board hires.
Yeah, but you want them to do the search.
But can we wait, hold the vote until after we go into
No,
executive
you
session?
shouldn't.
We should?
I don't think you should.
So George, are you calling the question?
I'll call the question.
All right, all in favor of hiring NASDAQ? One,
This is just there's no level. We're
Right.
just,
one,
going to
two,
contact.
three,
Well,
four,
she mentioned
five,
comprehensive.
6, 7. That's not in the motion.
Oh,
no, that's not in the motion.
Okay.
7 in favor. Opposed? Larry and Fran. Is that everybody? Davis, did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay. Larry and Fran. So that motion passes. So we still have a meeting scheduled for the 26th, and I would like a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
For, what did I write on here? I need to write this down. For personnel related to the superintendent's search. And Mike, Patrick, hang on one second. Does this board, how long can you wait around for, Mike?
15 minutes.
So if you wait around for 15 minutes, in case we have to come out and make another motion, then I want to make sure that they're all on tape, and otherwise somebody will come and tell you, you can go.
Request, please. Could Dick France sit in because he will be in on negotiations?
Absolutely, and before we adjourn, Patrick, your question?
That's all, I just wanted to find out what the truth is.
I have one other question for Jim here. So you were talking before about there being some other idea percolating around. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that members of this board were having a conversation about this and came into this outside of public session and came into this with some kind of preordained idea. Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Not on his part.
No.
But there was a preordained
People
idea
talk to
just in
people,
general.
people talk to people about, I bumped into a former board member last night, 2 nights ago at dinner, and he knew about it, so
So there's conversation.
there's always
So,
conversations.
Patrick, I am going to ask you, that I'm going to have the meeting, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn, but I am not stopping you from asking Jim questions. I'm sure Jim is free to. I appreciate your
So are we going somewhere, they gonna go somewhere?
No, we're gonna go somewhere, but I think what, Jim, just so you know, what I believe Patrick is getting at is that that you did not have a meeting of a quorum of people, right, Jim?
No, we didn't. I thought he was talking about the results of our search committee.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. To executive session, you said that.
All in favor?
Where we going?
All in favor, we're going to the conference room.